Hey, it's Spence from WP Launchify. This morning I'm going to do something new I haven't done in quite some time. I'm going to call this Coffee Talk, Legal Coffee Talk. Now, the basis for what I'm going to talk about is the GNU General Public License version 2, which forms the basis for almost all of the software that is used in WordPress, whether it be the core or whether it be the plugins and the themes. For those of you who don't know me, I am 58 this year coming up, but I've been practicing law since 1992. I'm a trial attorney in the state of Illinois and at the federal level. And I have a little bit of an experience with dealing with contracts, licenses, and so forth. So I'm speaking from the perspective of a WordPress developer and a WordPress community member for 20 years, but also somebody who's been an attorney for a longer time. And one of the things that has continued to perplex me is people who otherwise understand that the laws of society in the United States or around the world are how human beings get along, and they follow most of them. In other words, there's some things that are just sort of black and white, right? Biblical proportion, 10 Commandments level. Some things are just obvious, like when you come to a stoplight, you're supposed to stop, because if you don't, society can't have organized flows of cars. Everything would just be colliding with each other like a Buster Keaton movie. When it comes to gray areas like copyright or public licenses for open software, people tend to go into this very unusual mode where they just invent whatever version of reality they want. But unfortunately, that's just not how it works. So I want to review some of the finer points in order to clear up really what's been a misconception that over 20 years has evolved into a business strategy or model by some larger companies that violates the underpinnings of everything those of us who have been here for 20 years have been trying to do, and what Matt Mullenweg himself has stated from day one is the whole purpose of why WordPress, very different from other software platforms, has continued to use and support the open source. So here's the GNU Public License 2. Now, for anybody who's literally just coming to WordPress, whenever you get a piece of software from WordPress that runs on WordPress, whether it's in the core, whether it's free to get, or whether it's paid to get, the payment has nothing to do with it. All of the software will have something called license, and it has to specifically say where it is derived from or from where it is derived. You cannot take a piece of software, as we'll talk about, that was created under the GNU 2 public license and convert it into commercial software. That has been upheld in court. So, since WordPress demands that software that goes in the repository and software that's running on the core have a GPL2 or a GNU 2 license, everything you will see, whether it is sold or not, has that license, which by itself means you cannot wish away the fundamental rules or norms or standards or directives of the license or of the court cases that have upheld this. Here's a copy, for example, of a very popular plugin, Advanced Custom Fields Pro, the latest version. You will notice, like all software in the WordPress repository, it says the license is GPL2 or later. It gives a copy of the license, which we are looking at right now on the other screen. They themselves, this plugin is now bought. It was created by another author, and it was now purchased, Elliot Condon. It was purchased by WP Engine, and they distribute it without charging customers as part of the services that they offer as a hosting company. Why wouldn't they? It's a service like if you get something that is supposed to be distributed and repackaged any way you want, you offer it as a benefit to those people who come to you to provide the service. Now, Elliot is probably very happy with the deal he made with WP Engine. I don't want to speak for him, but he is now making his income from another source, perhaps. He is not being in any way affected by copies of the software that he gave to the open source community being redistributed. Similarly, I wrote in 2019 and continue to sell and distribute for free copies of my launch flows, sales funnel plugin, as well as many other plugins. I knew when I made that choice of going to GPL that there were people who would distribute the software, repackage the software. There's only a few limitations on what they can do, which has to do with not trying to stop the chain of the free distribution, of the open source sharing of the code. That's foundational to this entire framework of WordPress. Let's go into some of the details. And then I want to show you something clever. I have the basis for understanding these things myself, but I actually did a research project using some new software called WordWare that's essentially a way to generate a whole bunch of different responses. And I asked it a question that you can see here, and I will share this. And I got remarkably identical answers to the things that myself and other people have been saying, but yet some people in the community just wish away like fairy tale land. So let's go over it. The basis, and let me bump this up a little bit. The basis of this whole thing is that it was created originally to prevent corporations or companies from making software that was locked in. This comes from an era, predates Microsoft Windows, but Microsoft itself is a company, and a lot of companies were in a trend in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, where they were just locking everything up. And this was a backlash to that movement. The licenses for most software are designed to take away your freedom to share and change it. By contrast, the GNU is intended to guarantee your freedom to share and change free software, to make sure the software is free for all users. This is like the Constitution. We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure, the preamble to the Constitution is exactly the same. It gives me goosebumps to say it. The entire purpose of every single piece of software that runs inside of WordPress is for it to be free, to share it, change it, and make sure that it remains that way for everybody. This applies to any program whose authors commit to using it. When you choose to build something that works on WordPress, when you write software, you choose to commit to using it. That is why when you look at every single plugin in WordPress, they will have that license. I can only think of one or two exceptions to that rule over time, and those precedents were set by software that was invented before the GNU thing kicked in or before there was anything about it. And that software has no longer continued to be available in WordPress in its original form. It has died off. One of them was a membership plugin that Stu McLaren was involved in, and another one was another piece of software. There was a theme that went away. Its author is still around somewhere. And there's a piece of software that used some kind of encoding that likewise just got beaten into submission by the rest of the community who has talked about this topic for so long. Now, freedom software is not price. This is the thing where Matt has talked about beer in the past. The freedom is to distribute copies of free software. And guess what? You can charge for this service if you wish. So if you are a company like WP Engine or an agency like WP Launchify, who has an agency service called LaunchKit, I am free. You are free. They are free. We are all free to distribute copies of open source software. And what we're charging for is not the software. We are charging for the service and the convenience, whether it be the personal service or whether it be the tools that we use to distribute the software to make it easier for people to install it. There are some limitations to this, but they have to do with not molesting or changing the nature of the actual software that was in the chain of open source. We're going to talk about that. It does allow you to receive source code, and you can change the software or use pieces of it in new free programs for doing other things. The idea was that we are all contributing to the WordPress building blocks, and somebody can learn, oh, look how Spence built launch flows, and they can go grab my functions, and they can repackage my functions into something else, as long as they don't change it from being open source GPL2, and as long as they give attribution, should they use pieces of it outside of the original software. If they just take launch flows, by the way, this happens all the time. If they just take launch flows and give it away to their customers or charge their customers to get launch flows as part of their service or their agency, high fives to you. I made a choice when I committed launch flows to the platform of WordPress. That was the deal that I made. Just like a stop sign or a stop light, I choose to honor and respect for the good of the community, like the children playing ball at that intersection. I don't want to accidentally run someone over because I ignored what I agreed to, which was a license to drive a car means that I agree to stop at stop signs. If you agree to commit software to WordPress, you agree that anybody can use it for these purposes. It's ironic to me, by the way, that the people who are tending to complain the loudest about what the actual license in the law is that it requires of them are the people that aren't actually being harmed in most cases by this thing that all of us have known and have been doing because it's the rules of the road. So it's kind of weird. It's like the bystanders are often clicking the loudest and then imparting a bunch of false narratives on this. Now, to protect these rights for people to have the ability to use and redistribute and copy and do everything, they have to forbid anybody to deny you these rights or ask you to surrender these rights. For example, if you redistribute copies of a program, whether for free or for a fee, you must give all recipients all the rights you have, including the source code, and you must show them these terms. That's the part I just showed you in ACF Pro, a great plugin. They sell it. They give it away for free. Other people give it away for free or package it. Whoever uses it, sells it, distributes it, has to honor the license by displaying it, by not taking the license out, by not trying to fool people into believing it's something other than open source software. And even if they take money for it, they can't change the fact that they're not really selling the software. They're selling the distribution service, the convenience of getting the plugin. We want to make sure that everybody understands there's no warranty for the free software. Now, they do say that this has nothing to do with whether the software is going to do what somebody claims it does, which is important. If somebody takes a copy of launch flows and makes something that's a monstrosity of it, they can't confuse people by suggesting that the author of launch flows, Spence, made a piece of junk and that it broke all their computers and things. There's no implied warranty of fitness or utility or purpose. There are just protections over the ability to see and distribute and share and use the software. There's a lot of other things in here, but the bottom line is if you look over here in the terms, the details, okay, you may copy and distribute verbatim copies of the source code in any medium provided as long as you conspicuously and appropriately publish an appropriate copyright notice and disclaimer of warranty. Keep all the notices that refer to this license and the absence of warranty and give recipients a copy of this license. That's essentially saying you can take Advanced Custom Fields Pro and you can hand it out on the street corner as long as you don't violate the copyright of the owner. Copyright means you can't use the name of the company to fool people into thinking you are that company. Somebody can't take launch flows and put on a Spence mask and say, I'm Spencer Foreman giving out copies of this new version of launch flows. That's not a violation of the GNU. That's a violation of copyright because let's say if I had launch flows copyrighted or I had the rights to that name as a trademark, those are different types of violations. The software itself, they can do anything they want as long as they don't remove the GPL license or stop showing it, and as long as they don't claim a warranty for purpose beyond the scope of what the software is intended. You may charge a fee for the physical act of transferring a copy. You can even offer your own warranty on top of it in exchange for a fee. So if you have an agency or if you have a service like LaunchKit, you can charge a fee for getting the open source software that's curated and wrapped together with a warranty, a money-back guarantee that if the services my agency provides, including giving you this software, don't meet your expectations, I will give you 100% of your money back. It's right here in the Constitution, the GNU, and the details follow from the preamble. You may copy your copies. All the rest of the stuff I'm going to go into with just the summary because I think I've said enough on that point. There's nothing in this document that prohibits somebody from having a business that is nothing more or less than distributing open source software. Even if it's one of those sites that you go to where you pay a fee and you can take any software you want. There's nothing illegal. There's nothing immoral. There's nothing unethical about it. Now, there's been case law, and I'm going to get to the summary, but even as of 2022, we have seen a court uphold where a larger company, in this case, a TV maker, Vizio, they went ahead and they took the GPL software and they tried to lock it up inside of some hardware. They tried to claim that because they wished it to be different than it was, that somehow it magically took on some attributes that it never could have based upon it being created as part of the GPL. In other words, there were lots of authors who made lots of encoding software and things that made the screen show a certain way and made the video quality better. Vizio went and took all those things, tried to put it in their box and put all kinds of wrappers around it and claim that nobody can touch it. Now it's different, it's theirs. Very similar to what a lot of bigger companies in WordPress are doing now, including WP Engine is trying to change the fundamental nature of ACF by, sure, the code's still there, but they're wrapping it up with all kinds of scary messages and things that claim that if you don't put your license key in, it's just going to be unusable. They've broken some of the features by putting wrappers in there. Now, are they allowed to do that? Absolutely. They can do whatever they want. But that also gives the rights to anybody else who sees that as GPL to change or modify the behavior of that. Some people use a term called nulled, which is like a derogatory term. That is derogatory, and it's a leftover from an earlier day before many of us had the rights that we take for granted today in other areas and things like, I don't think I've actually heard it applied to like audio, but like there was a day when the recording industry, the RIAA, and then the Motion Picture Association of America were all in court every day of the week for 20 years about the rights of people to make copies of their album songs or to distribute them. And now Spotify or YouTube or any of these streaming channels, you can get any song, any movie, any video nearly for free everywhere, anytime. Except that's starting to change backwards the other way too, because the streaming companies now have started to realize, like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney, oh, we've got everybody signed up under the promise that this was all part of the deal, and now they're going backwards on the promises. In the same way, much of the software in WordPress operates under the proper premise, but there are a few companies that are trying to put wrappers and things around it, and during this SFC versus Vizio lawsuit, it was ruled that's not going to fly. Vizio can't do that. And it was a big win for software freedom, for the idea that WordPress was built on, which was open source software. Okay, finally, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but I asked the experts to essentially what you see here. Think like an expert in copyright, contract, and open source law. Please outline the current law and legality of an agency who takes a GPL2 licensed WordPress software that is otherwise sold by the respective authors and sells a monthly membership that includes access to this very same software as part of other services and support around the concept of building WordPress websites. Now, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who I think is a very intelligent person. He's very respected in the communities that he's in, and he runs a big agency. And somehow he gave me the argument that because he runs an agency where he builds websites, that's different, that he gives software to his customers than somebody that has a business that automates that process or creates pre-made templates, that somehow the act of some person pressing a button magically transformed the license or the nature of the GPL2 software. That's one of the reasons I made this video, is that that's not how it works. Saying that my car is blue or I touched my steering wheel before I run through a stop sign does not change the nature of the rules of the road. It has nothing to do with it. If you run an agency, if you run a business that distributes software, calling it nulled software is false because these are original copies of the original plugins with the original licenses in them. And you're not doing any violation of copyright by claiming to be the authors or claiming to give warranties that the authors never gave. If you're not doing any of those things outlined or prescribed against, then that's just a false premise. And there are so many people, even now in 2024, so many years later, that are continuing to operate with this idea that I'm going to throw some aspersions the way of anybody who uses software, even though I'm doing the exact same thing, but I'm different because I magically touched a mouse, or I should say the people that I hire touch a mouse and somehow no, doesn't work that way. So specifically the outline, I asked this to outline the case law or statutory precedent and examples in the real world from companies that do this very thing. Answer the question specifically with regard to legality, morals, ethics, as well as the underlying philosophy behind the GPL2 versus contract law or traditional software licensing. Be short and precise, unlike me. When I used to do trial work, I would have to go into these dusty old books, and I'd use a pad of paper, which, by the way, I still use, to think out what I wanted to say, find the topics, find the case law. As an attorney, I was trained how to think about how these things work in the real world, in practice, both in the court system as well as in contracts and in human relationships and capitalism, the whole thing. This is what we used to do, but it is infinitely easier now using these tools. And I'm going to publish all these results in the notes here. I'll put it on the website, probably Spencer Foreman. I might put it over at WP Launchify. But when we go through these topics, you'll see that they validate everything I just talked about because it is just right there. Under the GPL2, the agencies, and by the way, it's like 10 different engines that it's searched against. The GPL2, the agency's practice of selling a membership that includes, is legal as long as the terms of the GPL2 are followed, particularly around the redistribution. There was a surprise to me, is the morals and ethics, the ChatGPT engines basically came back in favor against the thing I was just describing, where the larger companies are trying to subvert the open source nature of the software. So ironically, my point is that any of us who make software and contributed to WordPress know that everybody should be using it. That's the whole point. And this says the ethical problem was when companies try to subvert that from happening. So ironically, the ChatGPT engines came back saying there should be more protection in favor, more support in favor of people doing exactly this thing, taking all of the plugins and distributing them around in a way that helps everybody in the open source community. That's the moral and the ethical part, which is the opposite of what this person was just trying to explain to me yesterday, that somehow there was an ethical violation by doing the very thing that the ethics are in favor of doing. Stopping at the stop sign is not ethical because somehow you're hurting the stop sign makers. Anyway, I'll let you guys read this. It's 22 minutes. I didn't intend this to be a rant, but I think it's interesting because we are in a valuable, exciting, dynamic time where the automated tools are allowing us as human beings to decide how to interact. And never has it been more important for those of us in the WordPress community who've been here 20 plus years to realize the Constitution, the preamble to our Constitution is right here inside of the GPL2 public license, and that everything that we have been doing for these 20 years is supposed to be in support and in furtherance of this, and that now there are a small subset of corporate entities who have the power, the leverage, the finances to do what we've seen in other corporate entities. They are trying to subvert the nature of this by deluding otherwise intelligent people into thinking they are doing something wrong, when in fact, the Constitution guarantees this is what we're supposed to be doing. The software is free. Any of us can benefit, even if it's a new way to do it that's automated, from sharing, redistributing, supporting, creating things from that software. That is what I believe Matt Mullenweg intended, and those of us who signed up from day one for WordPress wanted and agreed to. And I like the idea of open, fair, civilized discussion. I miss it. I miss it dearly. I hope it all comes back again. That's one of the things I'm trying as a humanist to make happen. In a world of AI and automated bots and trolling and all kinds of leverage from large companies who have now made the spread between the haves and the have-nots greater than ever before, my contribution to society in this third trimester of my life is to try to bring rational discourse, civilized conversation, the ability for people to agree to disagree, but let's look at the facts in public under bright daylight instead of throwing things in the dark at people or calling names or subverting them, which I feel has been really detrimental to the growth of humanity over the last decade or 2 decades, and certainly over the last 50 to 80 years. And I think that those of us who are at the top end of the chain have a duty now, unlike our parents, to do something about it. And this is my small contribution in the world where I've enjoyed making a home, and hopefully, and I think I have, helped 50,000 or so people, many of whom are very happy to share their stories on the front page of my websites, to get more done, be more successful, make better use of this amazing playground that we call WordPress. Thanks for listening. I welcome any conversation or any replies at help@wplaunchify.com. You can go to my website at spencerforman.com. I'm all out in the open, all the latest content. So either help at WP go to the website, click on contact me, join my list, make a video in response. Let's talk about it. I'll see you in the next video.